That's a fantastic start. Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit Committee. I am Councillor Kieran Khan, Chair of this committee. I would like to welcome those seated in the public gallery. Thank you for attending. For those in the building, there are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note that there is no comment section. As part of this webcasting, the council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done in accordance with the council's published retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and/or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room as it shows what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual by raising your hand, speak by pressing the button with a face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. It is important to remember that when you are not speaking, to please turn your microphone off. Committee members and officers are reminded to be mindful that given this meeting is being live streamed, any comments made and any responses given must not contain exempt information. So first we're going to start with the apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
We haven't, Chair, no.
Okay, great. Are there any disclosures of interest which councillors wish to declare? Okay, great. Thank you. Now on to the approval of the minutes. Following a request from an independent member of the Audit Committee, I sent around an email earlier today. Hard copies are tabled in front of the committees for their references. The email referred to my proposed amendment to Minute 2 of the last meeting, which related to Minute 6 of the meeting held on the 9th of July of 2024. The meeting refers solely to clarification on a matter raised at the meeting on the 9th of July. I therefore move that the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee held on the 3rd of September 2024 to be approved subject to my proposed amendment. Is everyone agreed? Okay, got it. Do I have to ask Chen yet? So Councillor London, do you have any interest to declare? Okay, great. Okay, so we will now move on to the completion report. Oh yeah, sorry. So we will now move on to public question time. There will be 15 minutes for this item. So if there are any questions from the public, please please let us know. Okay, great. We will now move on to the completion report for those charged with governance for the year ended of the 31st of March 2023, which starts on page 9 of the agenda pack. I will ask Hannah Lill, Senior Manager for Ernst & Young, to present her report.
Good evening, Chair. My name, just as you're not aware of me, is Elizabeth Jackson. I'm the partner from EY. There was a mix-up. I was supposed to be at another committee, but that has moved date because of an issue there. So you've got me instead tonight. So I'm here to present my report, which is the audit completion report for casting your mind back to 22-23 financial statements. And obviously they're on the committee next for approval. So this report sets out the work that has been undertaken for the 22-23 financial year and those financial statements. Obviously, we've discussed at many committee over the past year around the long-awaited legislation, and that was enacted on the 30th of September 2024. And then there's been a new National Audit Office code that has been enacted on the 14th of November. And that means we can now move to that disclaimer position that we've discussed over the past year. And this audit report sets out the kind of the risks arising that we identified for the financial statements if we were doing the audit in a normal way, the high-level findings from the limited procedures we undertook on those financial statements, and the value for money work that was completed in full as planned and as required by the code for 22-23. So I'll just quickly take you through at a high level the report. So the value for money, we didn't identify any risks of significant weakness, and the report concludes that there are no actual weaknesses in the arrangements in place. I just wanted to make clear, obviously, that is in relation to the 22-23 financial year, and it's slightly confusing in the fact that we're now sat in December 24 talking about something that was over 18 months old and the arrangements in place at that point in time. Obviously, you'll all be aware much moves in the council up to this point. And obviously there's issues identified in the report around the financial sustainability of the council. Officers are obviously working on that basis, but I just want to make it clear that obviously this goes to March 2023 and that the arrangements in place for that year, for that outturn position, for the budget position as it was, is there, and that the issue around, say, the town hall that's obviously mentioned in the report, that the council was doing everything from an arrangements perspective in challenging the partner in that and then the contractor, and therefore there was no weakness in arrangements linked to that. In addition, obviously with the Chargossians and the financial pressures that's bringing to the council, that also the council was doing everything at that point in time that they could be doing to ensure that the council was covered and is continuing to do so. On the financial statements, we've obviously done limited procedures on the financial statements, so we haven't done an audit in full. For those new tonight for the first time, we haven't audited your accounts in a normal way in which you would do in previous years for your unqualified audit reports. And therefore, we are moving to issue a disclaimer audit report for the 22-23 financial year. The reason for the disclaimer is included in the draft audit report, which is included in the detail of the report, and the basis for the disclaimer is through a no fault of your own as a council. It is due to the resourcing pressures within the market and within EY internally, obviously for yourselves, for your audit report being issued by myself. I think that's pretty clear that your council did produce the 22-23 accounts by the deadline in which they were supposed to, and that they have produced working papers to support those financial statements. We have no findings in here due to the high-level procedures we've done around the internal control framework or any weaknesses in the process of the work we have carried out for you. I think the reason for the disclaimer is probably, as I've just covered, and obviously it's pretty well rehearsed from previous meetings. And I'm looking to issue that audit opinion as soon as possible because the backstop date is the 13th of December. So the accounts for approval tonight, then we'll hopefully sign all those accounts and the audit reports tomorrow to ensure that we meet that deadline of the 13th of December. And then really I'm happy to take any questions from members.
So thank you for your presentation. I will now open this item for debate. Please indicate your wish to speak by raising your hand. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few questions. So we have issued disclaimer opinion. How this will impact next year audit, like in respect of opening balances? Or?
It will impact on the year. So yes, we will be issuing a disclaimer audit report to say that we've not audited your financial statements. They are unaudited. The FRC produced a very helpful guide last month around how then the impact plays out over the 3 to 4 year period of unwinding that. So for then 23-24 will also be disclaimed on the same basis, and then you will start bringing it forward where you have opening balances in 24-25, 25-26 will be the comparative opening balances, and then 26-27 could be the first year as an EY audit that you would get an unqualified audit report. But obviously that depends on producing the financial statements, carrying out the audit for 23-24 in a normal way, and then starting to rebuild that assurance over the 3 years, because we need to get the assurance over the balance sheet back to the basis of which we need to be able to issue that clean audit report. So it is a rebuild and reset over the next 3 to 4 years.
That's good. Thank you. And what are these limited procedures that you have performed? Is there an accounting standards that you follow, or it's any guidelines?
Through you, Chair. Yes, under the International Standards of Auditing, there are limited certain procedures that we have to perform for all audits, regardless of kind of issuing an unqualified or issuing a disclaimed audit report. We have procedures that have been planned internally for that, and all of our audits have undergone through that process. For you, that the high-level checks were around kind of the casting and consistency of the financial statements, checking them to the SIPs disclosure checklist, checking that you were doing bank reconciliations on a monthly basis as normal, so you've got a control environment to kind of underpin the basics in it, and that your financial statements, your draft ones, agreed to the general ledger, so therefore actually they had come from the source data. But we didn't perform any testing of any of those balances, so we haven't audited balances and transactions in the normal way. We also performed all the planning procedures. So we obviously got letters of assurance from yourselves as those charged governance, from management, from the monitoring officer. And then we built that into, were there any risks arising? Was there anything we knew where actually additional procedures needs to be undertaken around your laws and regulations? Were you complying with them? Were there any no clause, which is obviously non-compliance with laws and regulations, and all those elements that could then feed into my audit report.
Thanks for the comprehensive answer. Just one more question. Have you followed up on the last year issues that you identified in controls? And so there was some unadjusted audit differences, and there was some control observations that you have. So have you followed up on that?
We have undertaken limited procedures, so we haven't followed up the specific weaknesses the specific internal control findings that were identified in 21-22, because obviously they linked to actually the audit procedures. So it was around the production of the financial statements, production of the working papers, the engagement of finance with audit. What I can say is that obviously since with your new finance team, obviously that they were in place for closing down the very, very final elements of the 21-22, and the engagement from officers in that area was far more productive than previously. And therefore, although I haven't done a full audit, the information that we have asked around the value for money work, the information that we have asked around some of the queries that we've raised on the accounts linked to some of those high-level procedures, they've been responded to in a positive manner and engaged positively with audit.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor London?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the report. I've got a few sort of high-level questions that I would just like some answers on. First of all, are we the only local council effectively looking at 4 years of, disclaimed audits or incomplete audits, or are other councils similarly sort of affected or worse impacted than us? Would be useful to know as a starter.
Through you, Chair. The reset is of the whole local government market. So there are some audited bodies that do have unqualified accounts for 22-23, and I can't pretend there aren't. EY took a decision quite early on in the process that we would move to building assurance in kind of the areas that mattered. So focusing on pension funds and focusing on the value for money arrangements at all councils. And then we moved to disclaiming the majority of our 22-23 accounts. There were some 2 or 3 councils and special bodies that we have audited due to the timing of the announcement and the decision that was made, and they were for specific reasons that required us to carry out those audits. So the vast majority of our audits will be disclaimed 22-23, and we're understanding that the market, we're expecting around 400 disclaimer audit reports to be signed by the 13th of December.
Thank you for that. I've been on audit a while, but I've never encountered this situation before. So what are the risks associated with the fact that we now are going on for nearly 4 years without a full, complete, or that's what we're being told, and I realise it might not work out that way in the future, but certainly for a couple of years. What are the high-level risks to us with not having a comprehensive, a full audit, with having a disclaimed audit carried out on us? If you could just summarise that for members, that'd be useful.
Through you, Chair. There's obviously a risk in everything. I think the risk is minimal in the fact that the local government reset is happening across the board, and therefore there are many councils in this position, so it's not specifically Crawley. So obviously there have been some high profile incidents where it is specifically arrangements at the council that has led to a disclaimed or modified audit report. That's not the case. Your basis for disclaimer is around the reset, is around the local government legislation that's been enacted, and is set out clearly that there was no fault of Crawley, and it is to do with the reset position and the resourcing position internally.
More specifically, like, I'm imagining in my mind, my imagination could be running away with me here. Officers, and I'm going to highlight the fact we are, if we look at our budget position, we are in a position where we are being stretched to meet our budget. Officers are now aware of the fact that, financial transactions may not have an external audit of those transactions. So once you know that for 4 years, those officers, I'm not saying we do have any such officers in Crawley Borough Council, I severely doubt that we do, but nevertheless it raises the possibility that we are more liable to, people taking advantage of that situation, and therefore there is a risk. I grant it would be true of all local councils, but people could take advantage of that situation and make, where the audit would catch people taking advantage. That is now not going to happen. So is that a risk that we are exposed to? And then I'll have follow-up questions from officers about how we capture that risk. But yeah.
Through you, Chair. Yes, there is the risk of that, which would be in any organisation, that when we set our materiality level, that officers then know that's the materiality level at which we test everything above, and that's in the audit plan, plain to see. And therefore, if you want to perpetuate fraud, you would do so in a way that couldn't get detected in one large significant transaction. So that will always exist, and it's about the internal control environment within the council, and kind of bringing in the working internal audit and other control mechanisms that finance have in place themselves around those kind of monthly quality control checks that actually then underpin the financial robustness of the data. And audits are taking place again. From 23-24, so we are going back into doing full audits, and that's the whole way we're going to rebuild the assurance to get to that unqualified audit position. So they are happening. 22-23 was an odd year.
Okay, last question, Chair, would be, are we going to get a refund on our fees for that year because we've not had a full audit carried out?
Thank you, through you, Chair, and that's a question that's being asked everywhere. PSAA are our body that determines the fees. So EY will be submitting the fee or the cost from us to PSAA, and then they are currently working up a framework to be able to determine that fee, and then they will send the invoice, or they will let Crawley know what the fee for the 22-23 audit is. Obviously then officers challenge PSAA back, and a negotiation takes place before then a final invoice can be raised by us. So as I stand here today, what it costs us to do the audit and get to the disclaimer position may not be the fee that Crawley pays, and I have no idea where that figure lands currently.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Ashraf?
Thank you. I mean, first of all, it is really concerning, with regard to this disclaimer opinion. Definitely, that for outside bodies, for the funding and a lot of other things, and with regard to the credibility of the figures, that raises concerns. When we have a huge pension fund sitting on our balance sheet as well, we can have serious concerns about the valuation of these. So that's one concern. Secondly, I just have another concern on one point you raised under audit differences, where you raised issue about the opening balances and they were not adjusted. I mean, this is something very standard. Normally, at the end of the audits, we always have audit adjustments, and there should be a proper process there where once the audit adjustments are received, they are put through the accounts. So we have, opening balances in the next year which are agreed with the last year audited accounts. For me, it raises serious questions if this process is not in place. So can you provide us some more details why these opening balances were not adjusted? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I think that's a question for officers, but effectively, I can answer it from my side. It was due to the timing and the completion of the 21-22 financial statements. So you'd already produced your 22-23 draft financial statements and published them on your website before we'd concluded the 21-22 accounts. And therefore, in the wrap-up and the finalisation of those accounts, we obviously reported a number of adjustments and errors last year, and therefore then they need to be reflected in the opening balances. So because we knew about them, officers have updated those financial statements that are then here for approval tonight to ensure that all the adjustments known have been correctly reflected in those financial statements. And therefore we're approving, although we haven't audited them, we're approving them on the basis that all adjustments you're aware of from last year's audit have been corrected in the accounts for approval tonight.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted if officers want to add something on this. Thank you.
Just really to confirm that, yes, obviously following the 21-22 audit, there were adjustments to the opening 22-23 figures, and we did put those through, and those are included in the accounts that you have before you tonight. So yes, I can confirm that.
Okay, can I bring in Councillor Hellier, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just really building on the theme of what others mentioned, you mentioned that we've got 4 years disclaimed sort of audit figures. How can we check that we've got reassurances moving forward in terms of, you know, if people say that we're doing the right things, is this actually substantiated? And how do you go about it? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, we'll be carrying out the value for money work in full every year, so that will continue, and we'll also be carrying out an audit of your draft financial statements in future. What we'll be doing as part of that, we'll be setting out each of the balances in the accounts, or the accounts areas, and then we'll be saying, kind of, have we got assurance if we were doing it in a normal audit world, in a normal unmodified audit year, are we happy with that balance, and would we be able to give an unqualified audit opinion on that balance? And that's part of the reporting that will come out from 23-24 onwards. And then you'll have a clear indication of areas that have been audited, and therefore you can take assurance over that we know it, bar obviously the disclaimed position. And then areas where we either haven't been able to audit because, and I'm not saying this for Crawley, but the council couldn't provide working papers, often around valuations and kind of some more complex estimation areas of the accounts, or things like debtors and creditors, you just couldn't get listings that were actual year-end balances instead of just giving us a transaction listing in year. So that will then be clearly in your audit results report going forward, so you're aware of the assurance areas you have and the assurance areas you don't have.
Okay, is that it? Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Russell? Oh, great. Okay. Councillor Bobbin, yeah.
Thank you. Hi. Just, do you have a chance to review our internal reports to us about, and in particular look at areas where our internal auditors have said, you know, these are high priority things that haven't been done, and one is obviously that you were worried about our rent arrears, and I'm just looking at 23, but I'm also having a sneak look at 24, and I can see that, you know, this has deteriorated substantially. Rent arrears, the end of 23 were 1.3 million. They've now gone up to 1.8 million, but the provision has gone up from 920 to 1.4 million. I mean, will you be, but if you look at your materiality, these are really immaterial because you're looking at the value of our balance sheet, whereas in terms of income, these figures are quite material. If, you know, to have a 1.4 million provision against 1.8, I mean, it's incredibly high to have a provision that high. And yet, in the internal report, we are now apparently writing things off regularly every 6 months. But yeah, I was just staggered to see that high provision there. That was all. What would be your comments on that, please?
Through you, Chair. I'll take it in two parts, if that's okay. The first one, obviously, around the work of internal audit and do we review their reports? Yes, we do. As part of our, not only our scope and strategy, so our planning procedures for the financial statements audit, we carry out that to obviously identify any issues or kind of red flags for areas of work that we need to give a higher risk profile to. We obviously also review the reports as part of the reporting that goes through the minutes and as part of the preparation of the annual governance statement that officers undertake and are audit of and linked to the value for money work. So yes, we do is probably the short of it. And if there were areas so limited that they need to be reflected in your annual governance statement, and we would then follow up if officers weren't taking recommendations seriously and they were getting very overdue and they were high risk. That's when then we would discuss with officers the need for further reporting in the annual governance statement. The second part, I think, is on the statement of accounts topic, and I will have to defer to officers because obviously I haven't audited so I do have a view, but as I haven't actually audited those financial statements, I would not be willing to share it in a public forum, and I think that would be wrong of me to do so. So I think that question is for officers, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any other councillors who want to make any comments? Okay, great. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak. The recommendation is that the completion report is noted. Do we all agree with this recommendation? Okay, great. We can move on. Okay, so as it relates to the completion report, which we have just considered, I will be amending the order of business and bringing the approval of the 2022 to 2023 statement of accounts forward on the agenda, and we will consider this next. This report starts on page 87 of the agenda pack, and I will ask Vicky Baisley, the Chief Accountant, to present her report. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, it will be me, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Right. Following on from the EY item explaining the broken audit market, the statement of accounts for 22-23 are historically late ones, and they predate a significant proportion of the senior finance team. And bearing in mind that the team is currently working on the budget, which I'm sure that you're all aware is a sizable task this year, I'm not anticipating going into this set of accounts in any depth. We will, of course, do our best to answer any questions that members may have, but you may have to rely on written answers if we can't answer them on the night. I can just assure you, going forwards, the current and the most recent set of accounts are on the website. That's for the year 31st of March 2024. And we will be providing a seminar on the 29th of January for the Audit Committee for a full briefing, which Vicky will lead on, prior to those accounts going to through the same process as we have done today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I will now open this item for debate. So, as always, please indicate your wish to speak by raising your hand. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Belbin, thank you.
Just so while it's fresh in people's minds, how concerned are you about these rent arrears and the provision? Why is the provision so high, please, in 23 and 24? It has leapt a lot.
Yes, thank you. Through the Chair, I think the provision for rent arrears is made up of sort of current tenants and former tenants. So it's the former tenants that it's very difficult to track down a lot of the time. So we generally provide for much more of that rent probably not being collected, which is why the provision is quite a large proportion of the overall arrears.
Okay. Do we have any other speakers on this report? Hi. Yep. So,
Thank you, Chair. So EY report talk about dispute and overspend on the town hall building construction. So I'm just wondering if you have what these disputes are and have we made any provision on that?
Thank you, Chair. I was just checking. Yes, we've made full provision, but I can't go into any more detail because it's subject to legal proceedings. Sorry, I'm having to sort of check to get my wording right.
That's good, thank you. And then if you look at page 28, pension liability and affect it actual result differ from assumptions. So I'm just wondering if it is completed. I mean, there's a lot of dash. So for instance, a percentage decrease in the discount rate assumption would result, but there's no percentage given. So I'm just wondering, will we complete this or, so it's page 28 under pension liability, where we are disclosing the effect of change in assumptions.
Yes, through the chair. Apologies, it looks like we just need to come back to you with a written response on that one.
And then on pension, how we assessed pension liability this year? I mean, do we have involve any actuarial?
Yes, the actuary does that. Yes, it's very complex, and yes, that's why we have a specialist actuary, because it's beyond me. So
Yeah. We're happy to share the actuarial report if that will be of help.
Thank you. And then I have a few questions, very few things to raise, very minor. I will send you an email. And there's no material. It's just related to disclosures. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
all right. Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Okay. Right. So that concludes the discussion on this item. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak. If everyone is happy for us to take one combined vote on the recommendations as set out on paragraphs 2.1a to c of the report. Yes.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
The report that was mentioned on the pension, will that come to all members?
yes, I'll share everything with all members.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So is everyone? So if everyone is happy to take a combined vote, we will be moving on to that. So these recommendations relate to approving the accounts, delegation authority of the letter of representation and statement of accounts to be signed, and requesting that the annual governance statement be re-signed on the basis of disclaimed information. I move that the recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1a, b and c be agreed. May I ask the Vice Chair, Councillor Belbam, to second?
Second.
Thank you. May I have a show of hands for the motion? Cool. The motion has been carried. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to the internal audit progress report, which starts on page 53 of the agenda pack. I will ask Vanessa Anthony, the Audit Manager for Southern International Audit Partnership, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Vanessa Anthony. It's probably worth just introducing myself to members. I'm the Audit Manager for Crawley Borough Council on behalf of the Southern Internal Audit Partnership. So Iona is my line manager and she's your SNT lead. So today I'm just here to report back on the progress report that takes you to the end of September. I'm just going to run through some of the salient points from each section. So sections 1 to 3 are just some background information. There is a performance dashboard, which is the first box on the left of section 3, which shows the steady progress for the first 6 months of the year. Section 4 is the analysis of the live audit reviews, and these are the finalised audits where there are management actions which remain to be completed. It's pleasing to note there's a continued number of low-level actions in totality, and we have hopefully going to have some good updates for the next progress report, because some of those housing stock reviews will hopefully be actioned as well. Appendix 1 and 2 summarise any of those actions that are overdue. Section 5, I'm pleased to report there are no limited or no assurance opinion audits in this first half of the year. Section 6, in and around planning and resources, there have been some further adjustments to the plan since the last progress report, which is set out in Section 8. But there's sufficient audit coverage for us to be able to go on and provide an end-of-year opinion. And where audits have been taken out of the plan this year, we'll discuss those when we're doing the annual planning for next year's audit plan to see if any of those need to be part of that plan. We have removed some audits. I won't go into the list in detail because they are listed, but we wanted to bring forward one of the housing regulatory compliance audits so that we were able to complete all of those, and that meant that the leasehold management review has come out of the plan. Section 7 is the rolling work programme. That lists out all of the audits in which stage they're at. Since the report's been written, we've had some really good progress in audit reports being issued and finalised. But as I said to start off with, for the first 6 months of the year, we've made really steady progress. And we've even got some of our quarter 4 audits already scoped. So really in a good place to deliver towards the end of the year. And Section 8 is just those audits and the adjustments to the plan, but nothing of concern to note. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I will now open this item for debate. Please indicate your hand if you wish to speak. Councillor Hellier, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess one of the things that kind of strikes me, I know you said that some good progress is being made, but I think there's some critical areas here which we kind of don't seem to be on top of, or you know, sort of we seem to just sort of well, we're just not really sort of concluding. So things like, you know, fire safety, you know, with Grenfell and everything else that's gone before, as an example, to me, it's just critical that we actually get on top of some of this, because it's not only the reputation of the council, but should anything happen, I think from an insurance perspective, as an example, I think that leaves us wide open. So how soon are we expected to see a follow-up of this to give us reassurance that some of the things that have been going on for a long time are indeed being addressed? You know, things like, you know, driver safety, compliance, safety with gas checks, you know, anything that actually that you would think would be in the normal course of business. So perhaps could you sort of elaborate on that, please?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, if I may. As part of each year, we do the annual round of strategic audit planning, which we're just about to commence in the next couple of weeks for 25-26. We will always have a view on previous audits, what those opinions were, limited, substantial, etc., and where the progress is on the management actions. We do track the implementation of management actions, which is why they do appear on your progress report until they are closed off and marked as complete. And then as part of the annual planning exercise, we will always determine whether, for those systems that are of limited assurance, whether we need to do some drop-in detailed follow-up testing, like a follow-up review, a mini review, whether between ourselves and council management, whether we're satisfied with the responses we've received on the action tracking, as to whether that system can wait, because obviously there are a lot of competing priorities for an audit plan, or whether we feel it is of an issue that it needs to come forward and be redone fully as an audit. And we will certainly, with all of the health and safety compliance reviews, as you say, the fire safety, have some very robust discussions this time round as to where they feature next year, whether it be as a follow-up or whether as a re-audit.
Yeah, one of the things that really did concern me was, you know, on page 66, where we've got the electrical safety of our housing stock, and there's some 1,199 properties involved in that. And, you know, it does go on to say inspections are overdue, some being around 10 years overdue. That doesn't give me any comfort at all that we're actually following these things up sort of properly, for want of a better word.
Again, if I may, through you, Chair, some of those questions I think perhaps are for officers to ask you to answer specifically. Again, it's a while since we finished the electrical safety review, but again, a bit from memory, I believe some of those very long outstanding overdue inspections are all around difficult to access properties, and it's the instigation of the specific procedures around those to make sure that the council gains access to get the inspections done that particularly needed to not so much have a look at, but to be more firm to try and get that access. But anything beyond that, more detail, you will need to seek that response from officers.
Sorry, is there anybody here can answer that, or?
Through me, Chair, we will get the committee a written reply from the head of Crawley Homes.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor London?
Yeah, and just obviously, I mean, just to highlight to members that there's nothing stopping them asking such questions at full council if they want to draw attention to and get answers to such issues as well at any time. It doesn't have to be limited to audit. Thank you for the report, and I do agree with your broad summary that you're making good progress on all the audit plan that you've got going on. I did find slightly amusing your statement that no. I'm just trying to find it. Yeah, I think it's point 6, section 6. Says, no, section 5, there have been no reports published concluding a limited or no assurance opinion since previous progress reports. Because, of course, there have been no progress reports published whatsoever, I think would be an accurate statement. But nevertheless, one area I wondered whether I could ask for tweaks in future reports is, and it's following on from Councillor Hadley's point, is we seem to have quite a large number of high priority items overdue. And what's not very easy for me looking at this report is understanding whether that number is growing or diminishing, and really that's what would be a useful metric for me to understand, is whether our high risk items are slowly being ticked off by the council, or whether they're just being left in the background, because some of them, to the electrical safety, but also health and safety, drivers' car training, we've got 3 high priority items that have been open since over a year, and they're still not getting anywhere, and some other high priority items are just, their due date seems to be keep being pushed out. So it'd just be useful to get an idea whether high priority items are actually being closed out. And of course, you don't report on ones that are closed out, you just report on ones that are still open. So getting an idea of the churn, effectively, of high priority items would be a useful way for us to understand whether, whether we feel that the SMT are taking these risks and managing these risks properly, or whether they're just sort of doing it for lip service. And I hope they're not, and I'm sure they're not giving you lip service, but it'd be useful to get that idea.
Thank you, and again through you, Chair. I'll take the answer in two parts, and hopefully I won't forget the second part by the time I've got through the first part. In terms of the churn of the high priorities, that metric, and it's quite interesting. I was asked virtually the identical question at an audit committee last week. It is a very difficult metric to give you because it's a rolling programme for the management actions. So, for example, in any audit, say there's 10 management actions, they could have 10 different target dates. So just because the number's gone up or the number's gone down or the number stayed the same, it's difficult to give you that metric because that's a combination of new ones having come on board, and old ones having been cleared off. But I'll take that away and try and see what we can possibly do that would provide any meaning to a statistic along that. In terms of the way we are reporting and what we give you in each report, again, our reports may change next year depending on when we get onto the next paper, the full implementation of the government internal audit standards. So there might be different things coming into the reports for you. And yes, I've forgotten what the second part of the question was. Yeah. And I have, thank you, it's given me time to remember what my second part of my answer was going to be. And that's in relation to some of the high priority actions that have been on this list for quite a while. And I think they're probably going back, if I'm right, probably to some of the 21-2 audits, driver safety, and another one. I think when we first started the audit delivery for Crawley, it was quite a different process to what the council had been used to before, where they were more used to a traditional audit recommendation, i.e. audit saying, well, actually, we think you should do that, to well, actually, it's down to you, management, that it's your systems, they're your controls, you need to identify what action you need to do. And in that infancy, I think there was the probably not the understanding of the prioritisation between high, medium and low, and the linking that perhaps too much to a timeline in which they felt reasonably they could do it. So anything that they probably felt, oh, we can do that straight away, we'll make that high priority. Whereas now there's more understanding of how that process works. So there's more equation behind the high, medium and low being put forward by officers. And equally, I think in the infancy, there probably wasn't the due consideration given to some of the actions to sit back and think, well, actually, that is going to be longer to implement than we probably think. So I think in the first instance there was just a need that we need to get these all done, or in a quick succession of time. So the timeline for the target date was probably a bit too optimistic. Whereas we can see now in the work coming through, and I'm sure Carolyn and Siraj will hopefully agree with me, there is a much more realistic prioritisation and time target date set against the management actions that are coming forward now.
Thank you. Councillor Ashraf?
Thank you very much for the report. My question is about housing rents on page 72. These reconciliation differences, can we put any value on that? Are there material differences? How this can be addressed? Is there any lack of training here? The staff, or I mean, what are the issues? Why they are unable to reconcile? You know, because we have historic issues here as well.
So those questions, I do believe, came up last time, last audit committee, and I provided a written response, particularly around the reconciliations and the differences. So I mean, I'm quite happy to recirculate that again, Mez, if you still haven't got it.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Belvin?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My question is to help us appreciate the severity, or give us a bit of a put this electrical safety in perspective. It would be nice to know what the actual law is. A private landlord has to have an electrical certificate and a gas certificate. I think the electrical one's every 5 years and the gas is every year. How much are we within the law, outside the law? It doesn't give us a feel of just the severity of this limited assurance is. I'd like it sort of put in context of our legal obligation and indeed moral obligation to our tenants.
Again, thank you, through you, Chair. Again, specific questions like that, I think, are best asked of the officers within those areas. But again, just from my understanding and knowledge, for all of these health and safety compliance checks, they are annual. It's an annual requirement for a public sector landlord.
Okay, thank you.
So what is our exposure to fines and things? Could that not be quantified?
I mean, again, you'd probably just want a paper from the officers concerned to give you that level of detail. I mean, the audit is a snapshot. We come in, annual inspection, sample. This is what's met, this is what hasn't met.
I do understand you're looking more at our systems and where they're, but we need that quantified on the, really sort of, in front of our noses, what's the financial implications to us, really?
Okay, Chair. I mean, the report states non-compliance currently at 6.4%, with improvements still being made, but I will request a written response from the head of Crawley Homes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Huck.
Thank you, Chair. In this audit, main accounting, we have 10 action points and 2 high priority actions. So can you give us an overview of what these audit observations are?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I wish you'd asked this before the Chief Accountant left, but I will do my best to sort of answer the detail. Some of it related to reconciliations not being done promptly. That is now in place. There were sort of issues around write-offs not being done promptly. Those have been addressed. In fact, improved upon. Trying to think what else was on there, but they were all the sort of standard things. And just sort of to reiterate to members, we actually requested this audit to be done so that we get a really good baseline assessment of the situation. So as a new sort of team, we knew how to address these areas. So we've restructured the finance department to ensure that we get compliance with all these areas. Hence, there's none out of, there are no red ones because they're being achieved on target. And part of that was this learning process that our audit managers sort of referred to, that when Crawley first got the new sort of audit style, I think officers felt everything had to be done immediately, and there was no, I mean, yes, I would love everything to already be at a better baseline, but sometimes you've really got to assess the manpower that you've got and what is actually realistic, and whether it is high priority, because that is up to, well, to a degree up to the officer. I mean, obviously the auditors would challenge if you came up with something and you said, oh no, that's low priority, and they knew that was urgent and needed to be done. There is that negotiation process, but I think initially everything was down as urgent and immediate. But with the finance ones, because that was a later audit, different officers involved in it. But I mean, I can give you a list, and I'm sure these items were actually reported to the committee at the time. I'm happy to give a written answer if you want further information, but it is things like reconciliations.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a list of the point that internal audit has raised. But I'm just wondering if is there any financial implication from any of these points that were raised? Any pending provision, a write-off, anything?
No, none, Chair. I'm pleased to report none of them are sort of will result in any financial loss. But as you can appreciate in this committee, sort of control environment weaknesses do have to be addressed. And as head of finance, I have to take them very seriously.
And lastly, EY had few observations last year. So this audit confirmed that these observations has now been closed. So there was some control observation last year, EY audit report. So does the scope of this audit cover those areas as well?
The areas that related to the 22-23 audit had already been addressed. But yes, it would have covered the whole control environment. But that's part of it had already been resolved.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Hellier, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's just really one specific thing. It's just on the debt management side of things. Can we have just reassurance that, because I know some of the transactions were dated back to 2013, which seems a long time ago, and they're clearly they couldn't actually do anything with them because it's past the statute of limitations. Moving forward, do we actually have a robust system actually in terms of chasing debt?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Yes, I mean, I can confirm we have a new manager for the team. We now write off debts 6 monthly, which is important because you can't have all these suppressed debts and you can't delay writing them off. yes, there's significant improvement in the sort of chasing of debts. I mean, some debts like housing benefit don't expire, so they will stay on the books for however long it takes us to get the money back, unless you know, the person's deceased, or you know, those ones can go back to 2013. So yeah, I mean, I can assure the committee that the procedures are more robust, but there is a significant backlog that they're dealing with.
Do we provide for those? Because I think, given the council's financial situation, that we ought to be doing that if we're not.
Yes, Chair. Yes, so the older the debt, the higher the bad debts provision, and I think this is also links in with the questions we had earlier about higher bad debts provisions. We tend to be very prudent. Anything old is provided for, so we tend to actually get more than we anticipate, which is the right way to go about it. So in that respect, I think on housing benefit, we assume we don't recover things over a certain period, and I don't want to go into the specifics in this meeting because obviously I don't want to give the game away.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers? Yeah, Councillor Melvin.
Sorry, I don't want to labour it too much. But you know, in 24, our provision for rent arrears has gone up. It's really high as a proportion. In the accounts, is that the net amount of uncollected rent, or is it a net amount that's referred to on? So, because I wasn't quite sure, it's not clear. It just says arrears. So, the rent arrears at the end of the financial period total 1.8, and a provision of 1.44. So, is the 1.7 the net figure, or is that the gross figure of rent arrears?
I'm sorry, Chair. I don't have the 23-24 accounts in front of me, so I'll have to give a written answer to the committee.
Would be interesting. It would be interesting. I think the committee would find it interesting exactly how much we have written off since March 24. If we are looking at things every 6 months, I think we need to, have that figure to hand and review it regularly as the audit committee.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to mislead the committee. We're writing off general debts every 6 months. Rent arrears are a different system, and that was a different audit. So we're talking about the corporate debt audit, and we're talking about the new rent system audit. But I will provide a written answer that will give clarity to the committee.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other speakers on this item? Okay, great. Thank you for your presentation. Oh, shit. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, and the recommendation is that the report be received and that the progress today, as of the 30th of September 2024, be noted. Are we all happy with this? Yeah, okay. We will now move on to the global internal audit standards implementation report, which starts on page 75 of the agenda pack. I will ask Ilona Bond, the deputy head of the Southern Internal Audit Partnership, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The paper in front of you this evening on the implementation of the Global Internal Audit Standards is just for you as a committee at this stage to note. We currently operate the internal audit function against the public sector internal audit standards. They are changing and being superseded from the 1st of April by the Global Internal Audit Standards. These standards just bring all the branches of all the various sectors of internal audit under one umbrella for a set of operating standards. They go live for all sectors other than the public sector from the 1st of January 2025, but are coming into effect for the public sector from the 1st of April 2025. There are a number of quite significant differences in the global internal audit standards as opposed to the public sector internal audit standards. And some of those specific new arrangements where they don't map quite easily to the operating model of the public sector. There is still some consultation out on that to see whether there are any additional application notes or some appendices can be added into the global standards document as it currently stands. I mean, just for context, it's about a 140-page document, of which only 4 pages currently reflect the operating models within the public sector. Some of the new requirements for the global standards are reflected in paragraph 4.5 of the report that I've produced for you this evening, which is in page 76 of the pack. Again, there's been 2 widespread consultations out for the public sector elements. Both of those first 2 initial consultations have closed, didn't really materialise in much change to the global standards to reflect public sector, but there is a 3rd consultation out, which I do believe closed on Friday, and we're waiting to hear the results of that to see whether there are any other changes. It's a bit of a watching brief at the moment. As soon as the finalised standards are available, we will be in closer contact with the senior management team and yourselves as an audit committee, which we'll probably do via survey or email through January and February to get to seek your views on the final changes and any developments that we need to take into consideration as per the global standards, and how you as a committee might want to see those reflected within either the audit charter or within any of the reports that we produce for yourselves. There is one key document already at the moment that will come forward as a new document which we will consult on with yourselves and all of our audit and governance committees, and that is that there's a requirement within the global standards for an audit strategy, which currently is not there within the public sector internal audit standards. So that is a new document that will come to you as a committee next year when we bring you the audit plan and the audit charter for approval for 25-26. So it's a bit of a watch and brief. It's an information report for you that probably doesn't really provide too much information at the moment, because we're still waiting for the final pieces of the jigsaw to fall into place, to be able to really consult with you a little bit more fully, hopefully, as I say, through January and February, in readiness for the plan coming to you along with a strategy in March. And again, I think we've set out in Appendix 2 a little roadmap of where we are at the minute, what's still got to happen, and what we're aiming to bring to you by March, April next year. Happy to take any questions, although I probably won't be able to answer them, but I'm always happy to take the questions.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I will now open up this item for debate. Are there any members of the committee who would like to ask a question? Okay, moving on. Well, after that after that amazing debate we just had, sorry,
Sorry, I was just going to say thank you very much, and if it's all right, Chair, we will take our leave.
yes, sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, after that enthusiastic debate we just had, the recommendation is that the committee notes the pending implementation of the Global Internal Standards audit. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay, great. Moving on. So the next item we will now move on to is the update to counter fraud, which starts on page 83 of the agenda pack. I will ask Stuart Small, the Deputy Fraud Manager, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is for the period of 19th of August this year to the 14th of November. The recommendation is that the committee note the report. If we jump straight into the information and analysis on 4.1, you can see that our cases have increased significantly this period. This is due to the right to buy cases that we take on. Since the government announced the change in the discount, we've had quite a large amount of applications into the council on right to buy. So we are still doing our internal checks and visiting every single applicant. So we've got a rather busy at the moment with that. That's the reason that the caseload has jumped so high. If we go to 4.2, which is the properties recovered, if we start on the properties recovered for this period, we've actually had 5 properties recovered into the council stock during this period. Right to buys prevented have been 2. Prevented allocations 3, and the notional value of savings on those is £423,200 for the period. That's based on the Crawley Borough Council's figures that we have gone through at previous meetings, but is in the report if you want me to go through it again. 4.3 is the council tax and non-domestic rates that we've recovered or have got into for this period. So new billable council tax rates is £121,201.91, and non-domestic rates is just over 1.3 million. 0.5 is, or 5.1 is a significant case, which I don't know whether the councillors have had a chance to read. It started out as a standard right to buy application that an investigator went out to do the visit. And background checks were carried out, and we ended up refusing the right to buy and recovering the property because the person that was living there had actually moved to, I believe it was Leicestershire, but they'd gone up north from Crawley and hadn't been there for a period of time. If there are any questions anyone has for me, if you want me to go into detail on anything on that, I can.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your report. I will now open this item for debate. Are there any councillors who wish to make any comments? Councillor Hellier, thank you.
Yeah, just very quickly, it's actually good to see that there's quite a lot of recovery there. How can we ensure that all the checks are actually made before sort of something like a right to buy sort of proceeds in that? Do we have I assume we have a process, do we, on that?
Yeah, we have a right to buy team who go through the forms, make sure that everything's correct there. Then the form is sent to the investigation team. We do certain background checks over the council's systems. Depending on what we find, we can go further on external systems. But we will do a home visit on every property. The first visit will always be an unnotified one, because if somebody's not using that as their main and principal home, they've, for example, sublet it out to someone else, we don't want to write to them telling them we're going to be here at this day at this time, so it will always be an unnotified visit. But yeah, the checks that we carry out are quite robust.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor London?
Thank you. And yeah, always not good, but always fascinating to get your report about the things that people will try to pull over our eyes, and the work, excellent work that you and your team do to stop it. So, yet again, thank you. Just on right to buys, just because it has obviously shot up, roughly how long typically would it take you to do your check on average? And obviously different ones that are more difficult. Certainly the one that you report in detail on, obviously that would have taken quite some time to get to the end of that case. But typically, how long does it take to progress a right to buy case through? From your checks perspective, does it take? And then secondly, just, and I think I know the answer to this, but obviously a large portion, about 90% of the council tax that you bring in to the council doesn't obviously get to this council, it goes to other councils. Do we sort of get any money from them to support you in this work, in the fact that you're creating more money? Mainly, of this 120,000, roughly 100,000 is going to go to West Sussex. I'm not saying they don't need it, but do they rebate us in any way for the work that you do, or is it entirely Crawley Council's sort of cost? And in effect, the actual benefit to Crawley Council. Finder's fee. The benefit to Crawley Council is probably only about 10 to 20,000 instead. I'm not saying it's not still very important and very needed that you do it, but it's just a question around that.
Chair, if I may answer that one. We are the responsible council to collect council tax, so those costs fall entirely on Crawley Borough Council. But in theory, it's all supposed to be wrapped up in our sort of standard funding assessments. But yes, you'll find other councils will have less investigators, but we are very keen to investigate, because I think it's as much of a deterrent. You see the ones where we've actually sort of found something out, but you don't see the ones that didn't happen because people are aware that we're looking.
And if I go back to the right to buys, our initial background checks will be on our council system, so we're able to get them all, so we can check whether, for example, if a right to buy comes in and somebody wants to buy a property with their partner who's lived there for 2 years, but this person may have had a single person discount for 5 years. Could be on benefits, could be, we've had one recently where they're even on the housing waiting list because the property that they're in is not suitable for them, so they're trying to get a new property, but they put a right to buy in to buy the property. That is because of the discount. So this is where we are. Our background checks can take anywhere from an hour to a couple of days, depending on where we're having to go for the information. The external checks that we then take, if it's something that, for example, if a case strikes us as there's something strange and we have to investigate it properly, then that's when we've got further powers, so we can obtain bank statements. We go to land registry if we think they own another property. Credit checks to find how many bank accounts they've got and where they're registered at, and it's a case of chasing around, sometimes finding different addresses. The answer is, how long's a piece of string? It all depends on what the case is and where we're going at the time.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Belbin? Thanks.
Hi, thank you again for a good report, and it is encouraging how much your team work really hard, but do uncover and bring in a lot more money for us. But I did bring this up last audit as to what we as a council would do to sort of advertise the fact of how good you are to act as a deterrent, so that, well, not so that you've got less work, but so that, people aren't taking advantage. Is it general knowledge out there with our tenants? Do we sort of advertise the fact that we've got a full department?
When we have successful cases, we will always look to publicise them. We find that the fraud investigation team is quite known. We have local councils where we have meetings as an investigation team, and we go round Sussex, so we have them with Wilden, with Chichester, and they haven't got as big as, the majority of them haven't got as teams as big as us. I think Wilden may be the exception. We are known that we do the work. The Right to Buy team, the Right to Buys, people know or are expecting a visit, I think now, more often than not. And it's just getting ourselves out there more. We're working closer with the housing department teams. So we're trying to do joint work with the actual housing officers. So the housing tenants know that there's a fraud team. There's always ways to get us out there more, but I think it's well known that there is a fraud investigation team here and that we do take our work seriously.
And unfortunately, there is always hopefully a small minority that just think they can do what they like, and they're not going to be found out. Do you look at how they're funding these right to buys as well? So that, like a solicitor would,
They have to complete a insolvency form to make sure where the money's coming from, so that they're not insolvent. And under process of crime, as a money laundering, as a council, we have to establish that. So yeah, it is questions that are asked of them by the Right to Buy team and also by us when we do our visits. Because, for example, if you have somebody who is on universal credit and gets their full rent paid, but then they're putting in a Right to Buy, I had one today where the person said that they've got family and friends who will help them buy it, but they're on full benefit. So it is something that we will be looking further into, because we need to establish where that money's come from. And for we need to make sure they're making the right decision as well, because if they did buy a property and they can't afford it, then they'll be back on our books trying to get assistance in housing later on. We've had that before.
Out of interest, with the Right to Buy, do we have a time limit in which they can resell? So do they have to hold it for X number of years before they can resell it on?
My understanding is they could sell it on straight away, but within the first year they would have to pay about 100% of the discount. And I think it's a sliding scale to 5 years, and I think Siraj will be best placed to answer that. But I think if they sell it within 10 years, they should offer it to the council first as well. Oh yeah, there you go. So yeah, I think that's what it is.
That's good to know. So they have to offer it back to us. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Cadbury, and Councillor Ashraf, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I can see under 4.1 there's a huge increase in right to buy, 75, but there's not much increase in the numbers under 4.2, I suppose, because most of these are at the sort of initial stage. And also, related to this, I wanted to ask, with this huge increase, do you have enough staff to investigate all this? Because it must be a lot of pressure now on the staffing as well. Thank you.
Yeah, the staffing issue is because we're trying to do visits we are visiting all of them. So I was out today helping the team out because we tried to do all the first visits unnotified. So my first visit this morning was at 8:30. The numbers have increased drastically. This is where we were at on the 14th of November. The cut-off for the Right to Buy discount was 20th of November. So I think the figure that we got there, 75 cases, is doubled and then some at the moment. We are visiting. They've all had their initial background checks. Further checks are being carried out on a number of them. I mean, I think it's well over 250 applications we've had. A lot of these won't go further. People have said to us when we've done the visit, they're just curious as to what the discount is, and then they will look to see if they can afford it. And these are people who are on benefits as well, so we're not expecting those to be taken any further anyway. But yeah, there are quite a lot at the moment, as you can imagine.
Thank you, Catherine. Mr. Hart, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. A number of my questions has already been asked, so just a couple of questions that I have. So regarding this significant case, how long this property was sublet, do we know? So that is probably potential loss that we have?
I think the property was, the neighbours had told us that the property was sublet, but there was no evidence of money ever exchanging hands. It looked like it was a family member that was just staying there. So there's a difference with sublet and non-occupation. I believe this investigation went on for about 10 months, 10 or 11 months. I'd have to check my figures on that correctly, but it started with a right to buy, where the investigator did the initial unnotified, spoke to neighbours, and when he did a notified one, the tenants were there and they were saying that they were living there. And this is where our background checks help them, because we managed to locate them in another part of the country with a tenancy. And they actually told us that one of the couple was still working within Crawley, and we managed to prove that incorrect and false with bank accounts, because all the spending was in another part of the country, and it's not like it was just down the road in Horsham. It was a significant way away.
They were subletting for like 3, 4, 5 years, which is...
Believe they weren't using it as a main and principal home for probably about at least 18 months, maybe slightly longer. But at that point, yeah, we can't say for certain.
So do we impose any penalty, or do we have power to impose any penalty for, depending on how long this was improperly used?
The only penalty we could really impose is if we could prove that it had been sublet, and then we can take the money. We would have to prove how much rent they were charging, and it's a very strict figure. It's the amount over what the council rent is, so the profit that they've made from renting it out. Because we couldn't prove a sublet on this, with the bank accounts of the gentleman and his wife, there was no rental payments coming in, no regular payments. So we believe it was just left there to come back and do the right to buy at some point.
And then lastly, do we have a process to identify these cases as business as usual? So when it come to you when there is some prompt. But do we have a process to identify these cases in a normal course of the business?
Yeah, we have certain reports that we run. One of the ones that we run is the National Fraud Initiative, where we have to upload all the council's data to. This is then matched against all the other councils around the country, and we get a report back, which is normally quite large. And this could have come up. We get that every 2 years. So this one could have come up with being a council taxpayer in another part of the country. Again, that all depends what data is uploaded by the other council and by us, whether it actually matches.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other indications. Are there any other comments? Okay, great. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak. The recommendation is that the report be noted. Are we all happy with this recommendation? Great. All right, moving on. Okay, we will now move on to the risk management update, which starts on page 241 on the agenda pack. I will ask Anna Pedlow, Corporate Performance Manager, to present the report. One of the recommendations on this report is to determine whether there are any matters in relation to the register which the committee would like to be drawn to the attention of the Chief Executive or Cabinet. With this in mind, if you'd like a specific comment to be brought to their attention, please make this clear during the debate, and Mez will make a note of this when we come to the vote. So can you please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide this committee an update on the action taken by the corporate management team and staff to mitigate strategic risks. So if I just move you forward to section 7 on page 242. So this is relating to updates since the last audit committee, which was on the 3rd of September. We'll start off with risk 1, which is maintaining a balanced budget. Just to say that the mitigations have been updated to reflect the council is facing an increased budget gap for 25-26. The level of uncertainty is likely to continue up until the local government provisional finance settlement in mid-December 24. An all-member seminar was held on the 30th of October with another planned for the 9th of December prior to the budget strategy 25-26 to 27-28 being considered by full council on the 11th of December. Budget reviews continue and past efficiency drives have delivered some easy wins. The council may have to rely on further drawdown from reserves to balance the budget for 25-26, which is not sustainable. However, in light of the update to the mitigations, the scores with controls do remain unchanged. The next update is in relation to risk 6, which is water neutrality. Just to update the mitigations to reflect that the adoption of the local plan by full council was on the 16th of October in 2024. The key risks now relate to the deliverability of the joint working approach applied to offsetting, which is through the Sussex North Offsetting Water Scheme, also known as SNOWS, to support development identified in the Crawley local plan and development in the emerging plans of Crawley's neighbours. The risk scores with controls still remain unchanged. The next update is in relation to risk 7, which is the Towns Fund and related programmes. There's just a minor update just to reflect the outcome of the recent internal audit of the Towns Fund programme, which received substantial assurance of audit compliance. And this is the second audit completed by the Southern Internal Audit Partnership. But again, the risk scores remain unchanged with controls. The final update is in relation to risk 8, which is the local plan. As mentioned in the previous risk, the mitigations have been updated to reflect the adoption of the local plan, again by full council on 16th of October. There did follow a period of 6 weeks from the date of its adoption where a third party is able to submit a request for judicial review to an appropriate court. Such a review would have to focus on whether the correct procedures were followed in arriving at the decision rather than on the decision itself to adopt the plan. At the time of this update, and also to date, no judicial review request has been submitted. The risk scores at the time of this report with controls remain unchanged, but this is obviously a positive outcome in terms of the local plan. So in summary, no significant changes have been made to the strategic risk register and reflect the council's current position. And just finally on section 8, presentation of the strategic risk register. So it's just following feedback from the last audit committee regarding presenting changes to risk scores, and sort of the layout of the strategic risk register has been amended to show previous and current scores and the direction of travel of the risk scores since the last audit committee. So you've seen that there has been a slight change. So there's some arrows just to show whether things have gone up and down. Currently, the scores still remain the same from the previous updates, but at least hopefully that will provide sort of a more visual representation of that, but also that the main report will still highlight any updates that are made to the description of the risks, including any mitigations and any changes made to the risk scores where appropriate. And that concludes that update.
Okay, great. I will now open this discussion up. If there are any councillors who want to make any comments, Councillor London.
Yeah, thank you for the report and thank you for the updates to the presentation, which I welcomed. And also, sorry that you're always the last person on audit committee. It must be very tedious that you have to sit through everybody else every single time and you're the last one left. My only real question is around the local plan. When the risk description is described as failure to adopt the local plan and risk of successful judicial review, and we've clearly hurdled one of those two hurdles and our risk has not reduced, I don't think that's a sustainable position. If before we pass the local plan, our risk of this outcome is still the same as after we've adopted the local plan, but we're still at risk of successful judicial review. I imagine this will clear off at the next meeting because the judicial review will have passed, but I still think it's hard to believe that our risk is the same before and after passing the local plan of failing to adopt the local plan and risk of successful judicial review. It suggests that there was no risk of failure to adopt the local plan and all the risk was on successful judicial review. So really, I think this should have been updated to lower the likelihood of the risk or the outcome of the risk, because clearly we've jumped one of those hurdles. Other than that, I sort of welcome all the other updates and all the other risks and mitigations we've got, but I think that one needs to go, but hopefully it will go next time anyway, because we'll have passed the judicial review and we can forget about it for 2 years and then start on the next local plan and put that back on the risk register.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Belvin?
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you for now including the previous scores. It really is useful, but this time they haven't changed. I can't see one change there. It's probably here, and perhaps it's me at the moment, but I'd be interested to know where it says risk appetite, and we've got minimalist, cautious, mindful. How do they go in categories? Is cautious really the lowest, sort of the thing that we shouldn't have any risk on, and what's minimalist? What do they mean, please? Probably it's there somewhere and I've missed it. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, on page 244, so just before we go into the main register, it just sort of sets out, obviously, the scoring criteria for sort of impact and the probability, but also the risk appetite, so the description is there. So yeah, so it is at the top, so it's just sort of, well, as you go through, just reminding yourself, reflecting back in terms of opposed, minimalist, cautious, mindful and enterprise. The description is there, so just as a point of reference, it's just a case of just sort of going back to the top of the appendix. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hellier, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really on item 4 on the risk register under climate emergency. We've got there that we're going to achieve carbon zero by 2040. If I recollect, actually in the plan that we just recently had, wasn't it 2050 instead of 2040? Didn't we amend it, or have I got that incorrect?
I think I'd have to double check which
I think something sticks in here
Yes.
that says that we did. But
yeah, I'd have to just double check according to that. This hadn't been updated en route to here, but I know we're obviously in the process of the plans being updated, so we'll have to just double check what the targets are for that target date.
Okay, are there any other speakers? I don't see any other indications. Okay, great. So all committee members have now had a chance to speak. Great, okay. So all committee members have had the opportunity to speak. There are 2 separate recommendations set out in the report, and I will deal with them separately. I move recommendation 1 that the committee confirm its satisfaction with the risk management arrangement. May I ask the Vice Chair to second?
I second, Chair.
Okay, great. May I have a show of hands for that motion? Okay, great. The motion is therefore carried. And recommendation 2, with regard to recommendation 2, No comments were moved during the debate. I therefore move that no comments be drawn to the attention of the Chief Executive or Cabinet on this occasion. Are we in agreement? Okay, great. So there is no supplementary agenda. Therefore, with the business of the committee concluded, the meeting is now closed at 8:40. If councillors would kindly stay behind for a few minutes, that would be appreciated. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll just turn the